Good morning. It's still morning here on the West Coast. Good afternoon for you on the East. Uh, for those of you who are on the line who don't know me, my name is Jeff Campbell, Director of Strategic Sales, and we're going to dive into the Sage X3 manufacturing solution. So just before I pass the mic over to Denis, and he gets into all the details of the presentation into the software, just want to kind of set the stage and let you know where we're going to go and some of the key features of Sage X3 manufacturing. A lot of if you're in Sage 300, manufacturing is only done through an ISV solution. Now, whether it was Misys or AutoSimply or other solutions that were out there, it was an ISV solution. Some of them integrated well, some of them not so well. With Sage X3, everything is Sage's IP. Everything is embedded. It's the same source code, whether it's in the GL, manufacturing, or supply chain. It's all done by Sage bundled together. Now, part of the Sage X3 manufacturing includes the items that are up here on screen. So location management, understanding where your goods are, where they're going through the supply, going through the manufacturing process. Your quality control, governance and compliance. So if you're doing food and beverage manufacturing, if you're doing nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, we have to comply with the regulatory bodies, and Sage X3 helps you do that. Ingredients and recipe management, multi-level bill of materials, having the ability to have multiple finished goods on one manufacturing order. So as goods come through the production line, you can be blending, you can be making multiple products on that same run if you're set up that way. Traceability, critical in food and beverage, critical in a lot of construction, manufacturing, whether it's heat tracking. Those are all included with Sage X3. And then, of course, planning and forecasting. Being able to understand where your goods are at, what's coming in, what's coming off the line, what's ready to be sold and shipped. Denis, before you get into the product, is there anything else that you would like to add or elaborate on for this slide?
No, I think this covers it, Jeff, but I do want to give you a heads up. I mean, there's a lot of, for those of you who actually attended our previous sessions, which was the intro to X3 and mostly actually the last session on distribution, as you can appreciate, there's a lot of functionality within the software. We're trying to highlight, we're kind of showing you hopefully a little bit more than the tip of the iceberg here, but by all means, if you do need a deeper dive, don't hesitate to reach out, and we can certainly have a proper discovery call and then agree on a demo script and go in more depth in whatever areas that you would need or want to cover in more details.
All right, thanks, Denis. Let's take a tour of Sage X3 manufacturing.
For those of you who just joined us for the first session today, I will be logging into Sage X3 from a local virtual machine. Sage X3 being fully web-based, all I need is a browser, whether it's Edge, in this case I'm using Chrome, could be Firefox. So as long as I have access to the server, which in my case is local, but that server could be anywhere in the globe, then with proper credentials, I'm able to log in. So there's nothing required from my device or laptop, if you will, or desktop to access this. So I'll log in as ModX3 user. The main reason I'm using the ModX3 is the ModX3 some specific landing page. Again, those of you who joined us on the previous sessions, we discussed how you can customize and tailor Sage X3 by user to have visuals and then process map of your function. So it could be role-based, right? There could be user-based, okay? So the focus on today, on this session, is on the manufacturing. So the distribution sessions that just finished, we talked about the jalapeno bean dip. We're gonna continue with the jalapeno bean dip. So in the previous sessions, we ended up putting in a sales order for the jalapeno bean dip in location NA024. So in this case, the environment we're working on as multiple sites, multiple companies, multiple legislations, but we're focusing on a food manufacturing distributor, and the company is NA20, and that NA20 as two sites, NE21, which is the manufacturing sites, and the NE24, which is the sales and operation sites, if you will. So if you picture that, demand would come from NE24 and then into a transfer request or sales or purchase order, sales order into NE21. Then NE21 would look from a demand perspective, would look at sales orders and potentially at sales forecasts, right, within the NE21. And then when MRP is run, it would generate the work order suggestions, or we could manually create work order suggestion for the jalapeno bean dips, or in this case, jalapeno bean dips, or even the sub-assembly. So we'll see that shortly, where the jalapeno bean dips, as you can imagine, would have perhaps a final assembly where you put the lids and you put the actual container, but perhaps the bean dips that we sell in 8 ounces pack could be sold in other packs, or maybe that there's some ingredients in there or premix that could be used in other products as well. So the idea of today's session is to demo the multi-level bill of materials. Okay, so let's look at first of all, if we look at the from the setup perspective. Okay, so if we look at the site, I just want to acknowledge a couple of things. So if you look at the sites, we're going to look at site NE21. So within my company, and this is the list of companies that we have in this demo. Again, a single database, multi. So those of you who actually attended have been attending all sessions today, we talked about the multi capabilities of X3. Saying that, let me drill down to the NA021, and NA021 is my site NE21. So NE21 is actually tied to my company NE20. And if I actually scroll down to the details here, again, this is pretty critical. So from here, when we're talking about planning, right? So the default working days, we actually have Monday through Friday. There are schedules that we're going to look at that we can define as far as which days are open or available for manufacturing. But by the default ones right now are Monday through Friday. And then the type of site, right now, this site is a manufacturing site, and we're also allowing the sales, the purchase, and then stock. Okay, so I mentioned that if this site, so for instance, maybe you're a startup or you're fairly new to this, maybe the first phase is you're going to actually have a subcontractor or someone else actually do the manufacturing, and then you'll do the distribution of the product. That eventually you may want to bring that manufacturing in-house. So if you're going to set up a site that it potentially will have manufacturing at a later time, our suggestion is you actually trigger or activate manufacturing at that site, which will then allow you to transact or create bill of materials and do work orders, manufacturing orders at that site. Okay, so I just wanted to now that we know we work for company NE20, manufacturing site is NE21, and earlier on we looked at the operations and sales, I guess, from NE24. Okay. Other things to look at is we're going to focus on the jalapeno bean dip. So let's just look from a manufacturing standpoint. I'm going to click on my favorite here and click on products. I could use some of the workflows as well to click on products. I'll get to the same result. So there's different ways to navigate to where I want to go. And if I looked at the last red record, I mean, right now it's showing me the very last one, but I can also see the history of previously, like the most recent records. And you can control like how many records would show in here, whether you display, I think it's right now it's a top 8 or 10, but you could have like the top 20 or the most recent 20 if you want. Okay. So when we look at the FIN 301 through the category FIN, as we saw previously, what's critical as well is that the flow type, we're allowing the manufacturer of this as well. So any parent items, right, anything that you're going to build or manufacture would have to be associated to a category that would have to be that would be manufactured. If it's not manufactured, the system will not let you save or create a bill of materials for that item. Okay, so that's at the category level. The other thing on this is, again, product is common amongst all of these sites, But when you look at the, so product is common, amongst all of the sites or companies. And then if I click on my product site record, and I'll go and refresh this, so I can go look at my site NE21. So for product site NE21, let's look at this from a manufacturing standpoint. So we're saying right now that the product is QC managed, okay? So meaning that when we actually assemble or receive or record production of FIN 301, we may want to put it through a quality control test process, okay? So right now the QC management is set up as changeable control. We can make it as no control, we can make it as non-changeable control or periodic control. What that does is if I make it as changeable control, when I post a receipt or when I report productions of finished goods of 301 in production tracking, manufacturing tracking, it will then by default say, okay, I'm going to generate a technical sheet and I'm going to use this technical test here, QC0001, and which we'll see shortly. And but I would have the ability to say, you know what, for this time around, as I'm reporting production, I'm going to change this to no control or no test, right? I'm going to accept the quality or the status of the item. Instead of being a Q for quality control, I'll basically change it right there to an A status, which is approved. I'll bypass the testing. Right now, if your organization from a compliance standpoint do require testing, then maybe I have this as no changeable control. So that's going to force the creation of the technical test, and then it would force the user to go and put in the results of the test, and then from those results, the status would then be changed or released, if you will, to an approved status. If you do periodic control, then you can basically define a periodic would say, well, what's the frequency, right? It's every so many items. It's so like you need sampling, right, for, you know, as per like so many per 1,000, so many per batch, right? So there's ways you can control this. Again, all of that to say that totally, sorry, let me leave it to changeable control. But from a quality control perspective, the functionality is built into Sage X3. And just quickly from a technical sheet standpoint, that QC1, you define, or we together as your partner in your team would help you build the quality control sheets. You can have multiple ones, and then the idea is you build a list of questions, and then define what's the acceptable values. And once you actually fill in the test results based on those values, if they're within an acceptable range, then the status could be released to an A. If they're not acceptable, then it would either go to from a Q, which is quality controlled, to a R for rejected. Okay, so again, we're looking at the product site specific, I guess, for jalapeno bean dip for the FIN 301 item. Okay, so in this case, there's packaging involved, there's stock details. We're doing location management. So location management, so we're, again, certain type in the previous sessions, I had shared that perhaps there's locations where you don't need to location manage. Maybe there's only a handful of items or no large volume of quantities, I guess, that would be stored. But in this case, we do have location management. And from a location management standpoint, you can set up default location. So the idea is you create location types. Location types could be, you know, dockside, storage, assembly line, or you name it. So you create as many location type as you want. And then for each location types, you would have your actual location, right? Like your bins, if you will. Okay, and then you can even be specific to say, you know what, that bin, let's say, or STO01 is actually restrictive by, you know, it can only accommodate so much volume, it can only accommodate so much weight, or it can only accommodate, it's reserved for a specific product. So if a product has a home and you don't want to, you want to restrict other products from that bin or that location, you can do so. I mean, frozen goods, for instance, I mean, freezer, you could force the putaways into a frozen location. Then capacity container can be set up, that's fine. And what else? From a planning perspective, again, we're looking at the product site, NE0, so jalapeno for bean dip for NE021. From a planning standpoint, we're reordering based on MRP, right? So we're we're going to run MRP. We're going to set the system to that so that MRP runs every night automatically. When I come in the morning, I'm the plant manager. I'm going to look at this. Maybe I want to look 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, a month out. And then this item per se is from an MRP perspective, it's going to suggest, this is basically identifying to the system that we are not purchasing this item, we're actually manufacturing it in-house. Okay, so at that site, this is a manufactured item. And just to go back, just to show you if you weren't on the previous call, on the previous session, sorry, if you look at 24, NE24, which is our sales and operation, NE24 was actually an inner site suggestion, which is NE21. So we're now at NE21 to manufacture this, but NE24 is basically replenishing from site NE21. So now we have to supply NE24 for jalapeno bean dips that they've sold. And then in here, from the NE21 standpoint, you can set up the safety stock. So right now I've got 650 for safety stocks. What's my reorder thresholds? What's my maximum stock? What's my economic order quantities? 175. What are my technical lots? So from a lot standpoint, this is usually like from a, either from a batch size or like it's this helps me define like how many I would produce from a lot standpoint. Reordering policies, you can have, again, there's I'll spare you those to go into in depth on this, but you have all kinds of different reordering policies that you can define. Again, I in the previous sessions I mentioned that the reordering policies, for instance, could consider when you run your MRP, could consider sales order or quotes. I'm sorry, so could consider quotes or purchase requests, right? So most organizations that I'm usually accustomed to dealing with would not consider quotes as part of the demand, but I do know that there's organizations that will include quotes in that demand planning. Okay, so that's where you can set that up in the reorder policies. So that's what I wanted to cover on the item itself. Now let's look at the bill of materials, at the recipe for that FIN 301, and then we'll go in, once we look at the recipe and the routing, we'll go and generate MRP for it. Okay, so different ways you can access this. So I'm actually looking, let me just exit the product sites and go at the product level. So I'm just going here, now I'm at the product. From the product, if I actually click on the ellipses here and go to bill of materials, I can access it from here. So manufacturing BOM, or right, so there's my manufacturing BOM for this, or I could have just totally exited this and then clicked on my like if I actually open this as a new tab, as we saw in the new features session, the existing features session. So in a new tab, if I look at my process manufacturing, there's a shortcut right on my visual process flow, right? So I can easily navigate just from a single process flow and click on the BOM. And as you can see, I get to the same results. Okay, so let me just close this for a sec. Okay, so there's my bill of materials. So what we're looking at here is the parent product, so FIN 301, so that's my jalapeno bean dip. I could have multiple bill of materials, I could have multiple recipes. Maybe there's ways that based on the ingredients that I can actually get the same results, but right now my manufacturing code is 40. And if I actually jump to that manufacturing code 40, this is set up as a manufacturing, not a subcontractor. So you may have scenarios where maybe not in food, but maybe we're into we just wrapped up a few projects on medical manufacturing, and some of their process or assembly process involve subcontractors, multiple subcontractors actually. So you can, in the BOM, as you do the rest of the BOM code, if they're subcontracting, that's going to initiate a different process, right? So right now, let's go back to my BOM 40 reference date. This is just the date that it was like last modified. So that's my 11/28/23. Description comes from my product. And then I'm the management unit, so I'm managing by lot. So I do have, so I basically want to manage everything by when I do a batch of this, if you will. My base quantity is 66. So everything here, this recipe is based on I can't say a yield, but a production of 66 cases. Okay. Now again, we're thinking about, if you think about the down the road when we look at costing, we're looking at 66 cases, and a case would have 24 8-ouncer, right? So 24 8-ounce is basically a case, and a batch of this will make 66 cases. So 66 times 24 for the eaches. This, in this case, there's no validity starts or ends, so it's basically wide open. But if we wanted to have a recipe that was only valid for a certain timeline, we could put one in. We do not have on this database version control, but if version control is activated and there's version control for this item, then I would be forced to have a start validity date here, and then it would open up my version control process. So version control forces you to go through a process of basically assigning another minor or major version to it, and then a process of approving it, and then it keeps track, basically a strict log of what version that you've used for every build or every work orders. In this case, we're saying that it's available to use, so that bill of materials right now is active, if you will, or it could also be in development. So if perhaps that you're working on a new recipe in this case, maybe you've managed to find some kind of ingredients or spices that could be replaced, so that BOM could be in development as opposed to available to use. And then if you look at the components, so the component sections, again, this is pulling from your products, right, from your database. So in this case, if you look at the FIN 301, where it's requiring some bean dip mix, it's requiring a container, the lid, there's some labels, right, and a carton, a 24-pack carton. So this is the parent product, right? So the FIN 301, if you picture this, it's a case of 24 8-ouncer. And if you look at the, let me just, before I go there for a sec. So, and each of the quantities, right, are determined here. So you're looking at 576 of pounds, right? So this is 576 pounds of bean dip mix to produce 66 cases of bean dip, right? And if you look at the if you look at the container, the lid, the label, well, it's one container, one lid, one label. So how did we come up with 1584? Well, 1584 is 66 times 24, right? So 66 times 24 is the 1584 for that batch. Again, all of these quantities are based on the base quantity of this. And then if you look at the carton, well, 66, why? Because you're producing 66 cases, so you need 66 carton. And then in here, you can link the quantity as being fixed or proportional. So for instance, there might be, I don't know, maybe you have to open like some kind of special wrapper that by the time you open the roll, you're done. Whether you produce 60 or 70 or 80, it's gonna be a fixed consumption. Or in this case, they're all set up as proportional. You can do roundings on the food side. You can track allergens, and then like on the food, mostly on the medical side, on our chemicals, there is a modules or a product called processions that adds a whole different level or a much deeper levels from a chemical standpoint. So that's just wanted to mention that. But from standard out of the box, I mean, it's got all kinds of functionality around allergens and from a food standpoint. If there's any percentage scrap, if there's any ingredients specific that are valid for a date range, if there's any lot specific, you could put that in. And what else? I think this is it for now that I wanted to mention. So now we looked at the ingredients. Just earlier on, I was mentioning about the lid and the mix, right? So if I click on multi-level, now from a multi-level standpoint, you'll notice that this is kind of a folder here. So that's your top assembly. And then that top assembly actually includes a sub-assembly. So that jalapeno bean dip, the mix itself is made of, right, because you have a recipe for spices, or the salt, the onion powder, the paprika, the garlic powder. So all of those may be used in multiple recipes. So instead of reinventing the wheel or adding the ingredients over and over, you may you may want to recycle the same recipe within that top assembly. And in this case, there are not set as phantom bombs, so you would pretty much pre-assemble or pre-mix the spices, right? So there's in your if I generate a work order or a demand for FIN 301, it would actually generate a work order for this, but also generate a work order for my INT 301, which is my bean dip mix if I don't have enough in stock. Okay, so my INT 301, if we looked at the item level, the item is not set up as a phantom. And what that means is instead of managing all of this as a single bill, maybe throw different operations, it would actually trigger a separate work order or WOS work order suggested, or you would have to basically pre-assemble the jalapeno bean dip to then assemble, do the final assembly, right? Put the actual dip into the container, put the lid on, then put the label, and then put it in that one of those 66 cases, right? Okay, so you have your multi-levels in here. So now we've looked at the ingredients. The next thing is this is the what, but then what about the where and the how, right? So if you actually look at the routing of this bomb, now from FIN 301, and again, at the same token as you could have multiple recipe or bombs, you could have multiple routings as well. Okay, so therefore, like for instance, if you have two plants, maybe you could produce you could direct it to plant 1 or plant 2. Maybe you could direct it to in-house or maybe externally. So right now, if I look at the routing code and I jump to that, my code 40 right now is identified as manufacturing. It's actually part of my cost, and then I'm using this for my rough cut capacity planning. Okay. And then my bomb code 1, like it's this one here, you can associate that routing up to 3 bomb codes. Okay, so and what you do is after you put in the routing code, then you're going to associate this to a site. So let me actually go to my site NE21 here, right? So here's are my list of routings. And again, the key fields on this is the routing code, the product, the routing code, and then the site. Okay, so that makes up those 3 fields, makes up the key for that record. So right now, if I look at the routing code for FIN 301 for site NE021, it's available to use. It's not in development. I'm tracking time in minutes. I could be tracking in hours. From a work order management standpoint, so when I track work order on this, when I track the either consumptions or the issuance or the operations or the actual production of this, how do I want to track this, right? Do I want to say, well, there's no change? Whatever you see in the recipe, I will not allow the users to put in actuals. My standard is what I want to use. Okay, so or do I basically want to allow material change? Do I want to allow operations change only? Or do I want to allow change of materials and operation, which is usually the most popular, but okay, so that's what that means. From a document, you can link to a plan, to an image. There could be a minimum quantities, maximum quantities. Again, we're into routings here. And then within the routing is where you would put in your operations, right? And if you think about the bean dip, maybe your first operation is into, I don't know, maybe curing, right? Or mixing. So there's my mixing part, is my first operation. My second one perhaps is just like sitting or curing. And then my third one would be the packaging, right? So from an operation standpoint, what you do is you tie the operation to a work center. And that work center, I may have, so if I look at the routing, and if I look at routing for any 01, if I look at the routing here, okay. So if I look at the work center that's assigned to this, so from my work center is tied to a work center group. That's one thing, but what type of work center is it? Is it a machine? Is it labor? Is it subcontracting? Okay. In this case, my work center type is machine. And from a capacity standpoint, what is my structure of this, right? So right now, that machine is operating 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, okay? how many resource is does it require? It's 1, and then I can do automatic closing. So therefore, as soon as I've processed 100% of the operations, if it's a machine, then it's going to automatically close that operation. Okay. Is there constraints? And do I want to actually use this in rough cut capacity planning? What percentage of efficiency, and what percentage of shrinkage? So you can set that up. I mean, there might be some from a machine perspective, maybe it's efficient at 90% of the time. So even though it's available 5/8, then right off the cuff, you're short by 10, right? There's 10% of the time that it's you're losing capacity or efficiencies. Okay, and then if you have from that schedule, if there's any capacity variation, for instance, you're closed for shutdown next Friday, then you could say, well, you know what, next Friday, we're done, right? So you can, as you're running your MRP, if you have planned shutdowns or perhaps additional capacity, maybe you actually double up, maybe there's a second machine available for a duration of time, then you could basically update your capacity variation section, and then when you run your MRP, it'll take that into consideration. Replacement, maybe you're for a period of time, maybe you have multiple production line, maybe there's one other machine that you're bringing in as a test. You want to introduce this into your routing for your one other recipe, then you could, for a period of time, have a replacement for one of the operations and put that in. And then when you look at the optimization matrix, I mean, there's with X3, there's also a planning module, which is web-based. It's actually from a product called the Sedapta. So there's a direct interface to Sedapta to help you plan work orders. So it looks at all of the resource demand, work centers, and all the configurations within X3. And then there's a process where you go and sync it with that production planning and make your changes, and then any changes that you've made with a visual, like a graphical interface, can then be pushed back and have the work orders and like expected and plan release date and finish date updated in X3 based on that tool. Okay, so that's from the work center standpoint. Again, we're still into the routing and scheduling here. Okay, so now we know the where and the how, right? So there's two components to a BOM. So there's a component for the actual recipe, right? And then from a routing perspective, where and how. So you can actually track from a shop floor perspective, if you have operations that are labor-based, you can do shop floor control to track labor. You can do shop floor control to track operations. And then in labor and operations would be assign a standard rate, and then the components would basically be, now again, based on the configurations from the MRP perspective, it would consider the different transaction types accordingly. And now if I go to my manufacturing workbench and I look at my NE21 and perhaps, and let's just do a search for this. I'm not sure if there's any other items. Yeah, there's a lot of items right now that it would show up, that it would pop up, but we're interested in our FIN 301. So let's just look at FIN 301. And right now, if you look at and again, this is the MRP that picked this up, right? It picked up a transfer request from the previous sessions. So that transfer request was a sales order. And that sales order was for, if I'm not mistaken, was for a quantity of 10. This was the PO from that transfer request. And then this was a sales order. So the PO was from site NE24. And then the sales order was from this site. Okay, so that's just a transfer request. But then if you look at the second line, which is what we're interested into, is that order type WS, so work order suggested. So in order to fulfill that transfer request, because we're short, it's suggesting to manufacture some FIN 301. Okay, so from here, I'm just going to generate, and I could totally go in and generate a manufacturing order or work order manually. I don't need to do it from the MRP. I just wanted to show you what MRP would look like if we were to configure the systems and then take advantage of it. So if you look at the plan and order, no, sorry, I'm going to basically go right here. I'm going to go to plan and initiate. So the plan and initiate basically, so right now the planned quantity is 623. Why 623? I think in the background, I think I had minimum stock of 650, and there was I think there was shortages on that site of 37. So it's looking at going at rebuilding back that 623 for on that ammo. Okay, so I'm gonna go play a planned quantity of 623. I could click it and I could click on plan. So this would be this would add it to my plan, which eventually I could release it, the work order. Or if I click on release, what I'm doing here is I'm now releasing that work order. And now if you look at the planning, instead of the WS, which is a work order suggested, now we're looking at a work order firm. And that work order is actually WANA right here, work order NA021, which is a site, and then 0209, which is a sequence. Okay, so if I actually go at that work order here, if I look at full, and there's my work order that it just got created, so 1128 for a release quantity of 623. Okay, so right now we did the release. The scheduling mode was backwards, so it needed to be done by the 30th. So it actually got released today. So now this is actually ready right now because it's released. It's actually ready. I could go in and track issuance of material for this, or I could also track operations or machine, or I could also track production. Okay, so that's my work orders. Okay, so the status right now, the status of that work order, I would basically see where we at. Here's my requirements. Okay, they're all pending. It's been allocated. It's actually showing me my shortages as well. So right now, if I was actually going to produce this, I would need some INT 301. So this would trigger in my MRP previously, since this is short. If I didn't include only FIN 301, I would have also seen INT 301 for that shortages, right? It would have recognized that I needed that subassembly as well. And then that raw 321, raw 311, raw 316 are items that we purchase as ingredients. So right now they should show up on my purchase planning, my workbench for purchasing procurement. So the idea would be, well, the idea would have been ideally to actually order those so they're actually available today for me to consume, or at this stage I could generate the purchase orders for those, and then once they come in, then I'm able to start production. Okay, now let's do something here. So we're actually going to track just for sake of time, we're going to assume that we magically add some show up, but let's look at production tracking, and we're actually going to produce, we're going to record or recognize the production of let's say perhaps a part of those jalapeno bean dip. Okay, we're not going to track material, we're not going to consume material, but we're going to consume finished goods. You're going to ask, like, how do you then produce if you haven't consumed? Yeah, okay, magic happens in this case, but just for the sake of, I want to show you some what it does from a QC standpoint if you actually recognize production. And again, I realize that the normal flow would be to issue material first and then recognize production. So we'll go again these different transaction screens. If you look at production reporting, I guess you could guess that we're going to report productions. This would be for material tracking only and operations tracking. So or complete tracking allows you to do all of the above. So if I select the complete tracking here and I actually click on the plus, now on my production site NA021, if I look at my order number, so let me select the order number FIN 301, was it? And I could look at for today's date. So I'm going to pick the work order 210209, and what I want to do is I'm not going to track operations, I'm not going to track material, okay, but I'm going to track production. So I'm actually going to say that the manufacturing quantity, I'm going to say that I've actually manufactured 10 cases. Okay, so unit is 10, and I'm going to basically click on OK on this. Okay, so movement description is demo, that's fine. Now, this is my complete tracking. Now, guess what? earlier on, we talked about the quality control and the statuses, right? So right now, by default, in the either at the category of FIN 301, which I know it's not because it's actually, there was nothing set up in the category, or in my company's stock management rules, this is set up that upon tracking of production, that the default status would be a Q status, and it would generate a technical sheets if there's a technical sheets for QC attached to the product, okay? And again, because at the item level FIN 301, I add the settings of changeable controls, I could bypass this to make it accepted. And as you can see, like you have your sub statuses for the A's and the Q's and the R's. As long as they start by the letter A, the letters A, Q, and R, we're good. So I'm gonna leave it as Q for quarantine right now for quality control. And the location type, I'll just put them into the, let me just put them in storage for now. And the lot, I'm gonna basically go into the next lot number. So it's gonna automatically assign the lot number to this, right? And then I'm gonna click on, right now this is a lot complement, so that's fine. I'll just do this, okay. And then I'm gonna click on OK on that. So now what I'm doing is I'm saving this. Let me just save this. So now what I've just did is I just recorded a 10, like basically 10 cases of jalapeno bean dip, okay? Now, if I close this and I go back to my work order, or actually, you know what? Let's look at my WIP cost. So if I look at my WIP cost and I look at my last work order here, so last read, which would be, maybe on this one, sorry. WIP cost inquiries, let's just look at, yes.
We do have to wrap up shortly.
Yep, thank you.
I'll just give you another minute and then we are gonna close.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll wrap up at 10 to, thank you. So if I do the 809, there you go, so in progress, right? So now if we looked at the where we're at, right, we can see that we have 10 quantities completed, right? And then we would basically, if you look at the actuals from labor, material, machine, there's no actuals. The only thing we've done is we've actually reported production, but no actuals on this, okay? So now very quickly, if I go to the home page and I go to my QC request list, okay, because I actually add a QC request list at site NE21. If I refresh this right here, see, you can see my stock quantity of 10. So what it did is it actually created a quality control test. I'm just gonna go in standard quality. So by default, it forced the, it's forcing me to enter the quality control values. So I can then fill in the, details. And once I've, just for sake of time, I'll spare you this, but I wanted to show you that it actually did trigger a QC test. And then from a QC test, once I actually enter the results, then the status would change from from Q to A. And then I would, I could put them away into a sellable location or a transferable location. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that great demo. Thank you to everyone for being part of our webinar today. If you're interested in learning more or would like to inquire about a demo, please navigate to our website where you can complete a form under our Contact Us page. For all Bass Connect fall webinars, they are going to be recorded and they are going to be posted to our YouTube channel once Bass Connect has concluded. Again, we'd like to thank everyone for being part of our webinar today, and we hope you have a great day. Take care.